That's the doorbell at Jimmy's house. Now, when you come to my house, my doorbell sounds like this.
Hey, you're listening to the People's Weekly on peoplesradiounited.com. I'm Tim Best Buds. I'm here with Canadian Glenn and Nolan Hack. How you guys doing?
Doing all right.
Good afternoon or evening, depending on where the hell you are.
Yeah. So I guess we're waiting on Gal and maybe Top or whoever to come in eventually, and so let's just go over what's coming up on People's Radio and everywhere else, the View Up Here, and what Nolan's working on. But first, Glenn, I guess we want to talk about the MMM Live on the 5, 2017.
Yeah, considering what we pulled off last year, this is like super in advance, but we're starting to get it together. I know the biggest issue from last year, in our circle anyway, was the way we got DDoSed off the air for a while. I'm going to kind of go out and make a statement and say that's not going to happen this year. We're currently negotiating for new hosting, which will involve a different method of DNS and delivering the website. It will be basically network mirrored, so nobody will be able to knock down one single path for our signal going to the main site. Of course, everybody doing a show will be going from their own platform as well. But I think this is really going to help. It's going to make us a lot more impermeable to dedicated denial of service attack. And we're looking forward to having another full day of activity and information from both sides of the Atlantic. For people wondering, is it a lot of work? Well, what do you think, Tim? Is it a lot of work?
Yeah, that was a lot of work. But it turned out, I mean, even though, like you said, even though they took it down for a while, it went back up, and the only difference was people had to go to the various radio stations to hear. They didn't take the broadcast down. They just took the website down.
Yeah, and that will not happen this year.
Well, that's good news. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but I think it was really, it was a really good, 10 hours or something of constant radio?
Actually, it was 13 when we threw in that last 3-hour show that you did with Gear.
Oh, yeah.
Where we all kind of showed up like the end of the day, let's have a beer. So, how'd you get screwed today? Well, yeah, but I'm pretty sure we went 13 hours last year, and, we'll see. I mean, we'll see who wants to do a show that day. We did try some new things. I mean, Top was basically broadcasting live, mobile, for the first time he's done it. That was interesting, but it was also a damn good show because he was live as it was happening. So we'll have to see what we can come up with this year. But like you said, we did it all in basically under 3 weeks last time. We've got almost twice as much time this time. Oh, my God, what can we get done?
Yeah. Yeah, and I encourage people to get involved. The people from last year and the other people, we were taking call-ins from the streets. All over the world, people were calling in. I called into, your show, I think. And then we had the UK called in. We had Washington call in. 7 called in from there. Yeah, we had all kinds of stuff going on. It was a really good day of radio. So, yeah, mark your calendars. It's coming November 5th. The Million Mask March. So, yeah, with People's Radio right now, we just started a new show with Nolan and Gail. And it's called Who's Culture, and it's about pop culture and the influence it has, and It goes pretty deep into it. This first episode was about Pocahontas. It was really awesome. I encourage everybody to check that out. What else is going on, Nolan?
Well, the project I've talked about the last number of months, we're continuing to add more people, more cities, and more support. There's an article in the Workers' World Party online website. And if you're not familiar with them, they're the party that had Monica Moorhead and Lamont Lilly run for president in 2016. Had I voted, I would have voted for them in a heartbeat because, as far as I saw, they were the only ones to call for an abolition of this system and talking about rights for all people and an actual political system for everybody, and no more deep oppression of Native people, no more genocide of indigenous people or black people, no more stuff like having to create something like DACA to keep immigrants and kids, safe. They're just going to be safe. And it's on the Workers' World Party website. What we're going to be doing, and well, since it's out there now, I can talk about it. The other half of this, we are going after the curriculum in textbooks, in American textbooks that are very toxic and tell all these horrible lies about how great these horrible people were in the past and even the present. Like you're talking about George Bush, you're talking about Reagan, Washington, Columbus, etc. What we're also going to be doing on November the 20th, we will be all over the United States. We have Seattle, St. Louis, we have Boston, we have Los Angeles, and more. Even Wisconsin, we have the state of Wisconsin all locked up with people going to schools that have racist mascots, racist nicknames, and or schools that are named after racist people. So Andrew Jackson Middle School, Christopher Columbus Middle School, something like that. And you can sign up. You can email me at nolanawhack@gmail.com, nolanawhack@gmail.com, or DM me at nolanhack on Twitter. And even if you can't set up a protest of your own in your city, you can still help out even from the comfort of your own home, going after the curriculum like we are. And we have support from all over the place. We have Black Lives Matter Arizona. We have Black Lives Matter Vermont. We have the American Indian Movement. One of their sects in the Northeast, Maryland, and Virginia. We have so much support, and we want to add as much as possible to make this something that could really create enormous change. And this is, if there's ever been a time to do it, it's right now. So see with the administration and the White House.
Cool. I think, is Gail in here now?
Hello?
Hey, Gail.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes. We
Okay.
turned down the air conditioner because it's a heat wave.
Wow. Yeah, we're talking about what's upcoming. You have anything you want to talk about upcoming?
There's a Top Gear Live on Sunday. That's all I know. I won't be there,
Okay.
so I don't know what's going on. I'm not allowed to make plans. They tell me I can't.
Okay, well, in that
Tap will be
case,
here in a little while. He's a better promoter than me. Tap will be here when he can join.
listen to Top Gear Live on Sunday as you always should, and
And our Wednesday show. Did you talk about our Wednesday show?
go
Yes,
ahead
we
real
did.
quick. Oh, did you? Okay.
But kick it. If you got anything to add with that, Gal, certainly.
We spelled it right finally. Yeah.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
That was horrible. I'm a professor, for fuck's sake.
I'll give them a shout out now. Even though we're going to give them one on Wednesday. Aqua Boogie Baby on Twitter. She pointed out the mistake of the spelling of Who's Culture, and it's AQUABOOGIE baby. So thanks again.
Right, because we were doing a show called Who is Culture, the way it was spelled. It's okay, though. We fixed it.
Still a hell of a first show, and we're looking forward to next week.
Yes.
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday live. So, yeah, I guess we're going to start off talking about the Stockley verdict and protests that came after it. Anyone have any info on what's currently happening? I know a lot of people were arrested. Some were let free. Some more people were arrested. And
there's been, Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night there were arrests. Sunday night was the mass arrest of 123 individuals. Some were protesters. Most were media. They even arrested people who were just walking down the street. They kettled them. And then, of course, did the dispersal order, but they had kettled them so they couldn't get out. And then they arrested them. They were let out the next day. I am not sure of what charges were brought. I know that they were charged. In St. Louis, in Missouri, they can be charged with a felony for resisting arrest at a protest. Now, that passed earlier this year.
The St. Louis Police Department publicly released their names and information and what they were arrested for, and a lot of them were interfering, which is, as I've said before, a common charge police give when they have no valid charge. They just say interfering. That's what they gave me when I was filming them before. And it causes a whole year-long court case. They try to force you to plead to this or that. It's just a bunch of BS. And I noticed a lot of them were for interfering.
It's I won't call it a complete police state, but geez, it's in the ballpark, and I know it's been like this the whole time in this country, but not in these moments of uprising, they just keep pumping cops at us and weaponry and evolving genocide. I was talking about the other day. I was tweeting about how with the Chicago cops, they have added more police to the streets. And this is exactly what they did to us during slavery when we revolted. And now you're seeing this also, of course, the same thing in St. Louis. So it's scary. There's no doubt about that.
So there's like a few things to understand with the history of the St. Louis police. Mapping police violence. .com, I do believe, is the website. That is Sam, Dre, and Janetta, I think. Netta. But they have collected as much data from the last 5 years of police violence, and nobody even comes close to St. Louis, not even New York. So we've killed, I haven't killed anybody, but St. Louis police has killed 7 people this year, which is ahead of everybody, like it's a fucking race. And so that's one of the reasons I think a lot of people don't understand the backlash that is happening, is this is ongoing just as it is everywhere else, and we've been seeing it for a long time. But St. Louis police is one of the most violent that are never held accountable. So the Stockley verdict was the, what broke the camel's back, technically, if you want to get into that. The other thing I wanted to bring up, though, is that what St. Louis police decided to do was release all of that information that Tim just was talking about, of the charges and the addresses of everybody arrested on Twitter. Now, we do have the Sunshine Law. Yes. So we do have the Sunshine Law, and that's what they, of course, call, they said they're allowed to do that, which they are allowed to do that. Usually they do it in like a newspaper, or you have to request it. Anybody who's ever tried to request anything from St. Louis will tell you it takes like a year to get one request through. So they have never in the history of Twitter, since they have been on there, released the name of those who were arrested. And those who were arrested over this weekend had nothing to do with the protests. Their addresses were not released. So, of course, that has led to a lot of death threats. I know that Z has gotten consistent death threats since that occurred. I know that for a fact, as being one of the admins and mods of the page. They just keep coming through. You've got cops just nonstop. They closed down my Facebook page.
I have a question about this.
It's been fun. A fun, stressful week. There will be protests tonight.
I'm just curious about this new direction of the St. Louis Police.
What's your question?
Would it make any sense to put together this new method of trying to identify people who are innocent before proven guilty of any charge? Is this something that is because of other organizations that members of the St. Louis Police may or may not be members of, if you know what I'm trying to say?
Exactly. Yes, it's signaling to their supporters, their alt-right supporters, to be vigilantes. That's all it fucking is, and I don't care what they say. They have never done this before. So to tell me that this is not some form of signal so people can go actually do what they want them to do, that's exactly what this is.
That sounds pretty constitutional.
Yeah, they just doxed a whole bunch of people. And they dox them knowing that there's terrorist groups out there that kill people. And they dox them. So these white supremacist terrorists can send them death threats. Revolutionary Z posted a couple of those up there, like screenshots of them.
Yeah. Yep. We've been calling them out all week for it, but of course they don't care. They just claim the Sunshine Law. Also what they did, the St. Louis County FOP decided that they were going to share the details of one particular pizzeria in, I think it's the Loop, or the Central West End, which were two of the areas the protest happened last week. And it's a white owner who, it's Pi's Pizzeria, P-I. And what happened is he actually stood up. He decided his story really was that he was getting ready to close up and leave. He saw the massive amount of cops show up while it was very peaceful. And so he decided to stay, and in case there was violence, to protect his business. And then he was actually gassed, tear gassed. He was maced, and he got involved in it that way. Now, Pies has in the past actually supported the police, given them free pizza. They had a lot of discounts, but now he is now standing up against them because he's been part of this police brutality. He has seen it with his own eyes. And there's been a lot, I understand there's a lot of talk with that we shouldn't support or we should support, and that's not what I'm really talking about here. But what the FOP did was that they shared a BlueLivesMatter.com story about this pizzeria, who had actually spoke out against the police brutality on Sunday, I believe it was. Monday, they shared it. And the FOP actually added 3 of his home phone number and 2 of his business phone numbers, and told people they were encouraging them to harass him and to boycott and things like that. He has gotten a lot of support. As soon as I get home, I'll actually read a statement he posted today. It's a very well-written statement about how this isn't about him. They need to stop focusing on him. We need to focus on Black-owned businesses and Black lives. But I give him credit for, standing up with this now finally and opening his eyes.
Because it became personal to him.
Absolutely, but that's what it's going to take, sadly.
I was reading an article, I think it was by a white lady in St. Louis that said the police she always supported, and they treated her so roughly, and she saw them saying they just wanted to gas the protesters who weren't doing anything. And since then, she's been ultra skeptical and it's kind of turned her in the way the police, but it was about how the police had treated her so rudely and pushed her off, and you know what I mean? And this is on her street.
Yep, that's what it's going to take. It's what it's going to take. I mean, it's what it takes for a lot of people, because we've been socialized to believe that African Americans are criminal, that they deserve what they get, and that privilege is believing that they're lying when they say that they're being oppressed, when they say that they're being abused. And it takes seeing it with your own eyes for many people to come forward and go, okay, that's why live streams are so important. because now people can see it just even on their computer. They can see what's really happening. Oh, okay,
The truth.
still here.
It is the truth.
I know one of the reason my Facebook page had gotten shut down Sunday night is because I was grabbing clips as Z was live, and one of the clips that I grabbed showed the St. Louis Police Department running around with their assault rifles shooting less than lethals, just randomly like they were in fucking Call of Duty. And so that is what got me taken down on my other one. I have a new Facebook page. Fuck you, Facebook. I don't care. And then, of course, I posted the last 5 minutes of Z stream before he was arrested Sunday night, where they were violently attacking him and everybody who was sitting there peacefully. They were macing him. Whoa.
She's listening to, Gal is so
Who's
vain
listening to that? Is that
she was
me?
listening
Yes.
to the show while she was
It's on
talking.
my phone, and I was listening before you added me. Where the hell did that come from?
Oh my goodness.
I'm curious about how the St. Louis corporate media is playing this, like with the doxing of those arrested and stuff. Are they just putting it out there and having no comment, or are they actively encouraging the description that these people arrested for basically being in the street are agitators or black bloc or any of this crap?
So that's a fantastic question, because it's been quite interesting and a little different than what we saw in Ferguson. And that is that most of the news stations are still doing their regular parroting everything the police say. But there have been a few journalists that were actively involved in being arrested. They weren't doing anything other than their job. So St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which is our main newspaper in St. Louis, had one of their journalists who was caught up Sunday night in the mass arrest. And so since one of their journalists was attacked, now you see St. Louis Post-Dispatch actually stop parroting what the police are saying. And they are starting to question kind of the arrests and the motivations of the police occasionally, at least more than they ever have in the past. I also saw our local Channel 5, I think it was KSDK, maybe it was them, I'm not sure, who is kind of started questioning it a little bit more, at least on Twitter, but I haven't seen it on the actual newscast where anything's been questioned. Normally it's just the regular parrot of they were violent, they threw this, they threw that, and so on.
Oh, it's rather interesting how everything's cool until, hey, he's one of our guys. You can't do that.
Right, and that's exactly what they're saying. I remember on Wednesday, I think it was, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch released an article saying that they demand that the charges for their journalists to be dropped, but they didn't demand charges for anybody else to be dropped, just their journalists.
Corporate objectivity.
Right.
Is there any sign that this is going to stop anytime soon in the Metro St. Louis?
I didn't hear what you said, Lynn.
Oh, I'm curious. Is there any sign that this is going to settle down anytime soon?
No,
in St. Louis?
no. There are multiple protests planned for tonight. Today there was an open carry protest. I'm not sure it's going to work all day, how that went, and that, of course, was to intimidate the Black Lives Matter protesters. But they have been focusing on, like, no justice, no profit, instead of just no justice, no peace. And over $10 million was lost in St. Louis last week. More than that, actually, $6 million were lost in Metrolink. And we saw 2 major concerts, U2 and Ed Sheeran, were canceled because of the protest. So their idea of no economic profit is working, because it's not going to change the majority's mind until they are affected by it somehow. And so that's the point. I'm not sure where anything is tonight. I've seen multiple things. Usually you just have to wait till it goes live. But it's not slowing down.
Well, good to hear.
Yeah,
I would say that it's actually... Hello?
What happened?
Uh-oh.
Was that
There
the
we go.
St. Louis police trying to get us to stop this broadcast?
Right? But what I was going to say is I would say it's actually picking up. Last night was the White Ally protest at the Billy Joel concert. which a massive amount of white allies showed up, and it was a beautiful sight. But of course, they were treated completely different than previous protesters. There was nobody being tear gassed, nobody being maced, and the cops were pretty laid back, as we always see whenever it is a majority of white population, just like with the Women's March and the Science March and things like that.
I imagine there would have been a different response if it was not a Billy Joel concert. Let's say it was
How could
The
you
Weeknd.
Brian McKnight, as long as it's a if it's a colored performer and it's mostly people of color going to the concert. But obviously, if it's a rap artist, then yeah, that's even turned up even more. But Billy Joel, oh no, he's so soft and serene and white and nice. Nothing bad's going to happen here. We're not going to let anything bad happen here. But Gal was talking about it. The cops are, as always, inciting the violence, creating the violence. The reason why they're protesting in the first place is because a cop murdered a black man and then got off for doing that, as they always do. Even saying, I'm going to kill that mother effer on tape. So it's for the police being the police.
Yeah. I know earlier you said we're not living in a police state, but I would argue we have been living in a police state for a long time. It's just slowly turning into a militarized police state.
That's a fair comment. We've gotten 24. We're up to 24, including one today, of police killings of civilians. 20. Is that? 20. Am I reading this right? 24. Holy mother! Wow. 24. We're up to 24, and this one was in Oceanside. My dad used to live here. Jeez.
Up to 24 what?
You mean just in California or what? Because the number is well over 800.
Oh, well, for the year, yes. It's since the Stockley trial.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, I see your point.
Okay.
You didn't say that, Nolan.
I should have said yes. The police are so crazy; they're messing with my mind. Since its 15th, since the Stockley verdict was read, 24 people have been killed in the United States by the police that we know of. And there were 1, 2, 4 yesterday.
And that's about the equivalent of the amount of police that would be killed every year in this country. And they're doing that in less than a month. All the time. They're saying we're up to 2 or 3 a day now. Police killing.
One of these people on the 15th, actually the same day as Stockley got off. Ruben Urbina, 15-year-old colored kid, killed in Virginia by the police. 15 years old. And I haven't before or since heard anything from the media about that in terms of the mainstream.
I mean, yeah, if they're doing 2 or 3 a day, you hear about them more on local news because the mainstream news goes for super, shock value kind of big story stuff. So the majority of the country probably doesn't hear about a lot of them all the time. It should be an outrage every single time. Hey, Top's in here now.
Evening, guys. How's it going?
Good.
How you doing, man?
I'm not too bad. I'd like to say one thing, and I've been screaming this all over Twitter. St. Louis, Missouri Police Department are a terrorist organization. Yep. They're an enemy of the state. They've killed more people.
Well, they're part of the state. They're an enemy of the people, but the state is who they work for.
They are an enemy of the people. They are the top of the list for the most amount of deaths per 100,000 capita.
The state is the terrorist. That's the problem. It's like a
Yeah,
terrorist group with all the power and all the resources.
yeah. Gal and I were talking about this last night. She showed the most killings by a single police force in recent times, and St. Louis #1. And I was looking at it. I think I remember seeing that before, and there are a bunch of California police departments up there, and I was telling Gal the same thing. I mean, this is American police. You will be. It's like finding a unicorn if you want to find a police force in the United States. And Top actually just put it in the group chat that we have for the show. But it's like trying to find a unicorn. If you want to find an American police force that isn't a terrorist organization, let alone halfway decent. You know, I live 30 minutes from the LAPD headquarters. They're one of the biggest terrorist organizations in the world. This is how these people were birthed from slave patrols and native patrols, protecting the white citizens from black and native people at the same time, harming and killing black and native people. And that, of course, hasn't stopped even on Friday, September 22nd, 2017.
I'm just looking at something that Top sent to us in the Skype chat, and it's the rate of police killings per population from January 13 through June 2017 in the United States. And true enough, the St. Louis Metro is far and away the leader. But I think it demonstrates something else we're talking about. Tim said, these local killings by law enforcement have become so regular. They attempt to normalize it as a part of city life now. Some of these names on this list, I can't recall hearing of a single incident in that city over this entire time frame this is based on. But from the results of this compilation, you should be hearing about them. I mean, Spokane, Washington is in the top 10. When have you ever, when have you heard anything about...
Washington police or state police are horrible. They've killed at least 3 pregnant women in the last year. Jacqueline Sailors, she had 4 kids, Native woman, pregnant. Charlene Lyles, 3 kids, was pregnant. And I believe, I don't know if she's the youngest, but I think she's about 4. Charlene's daughter has Down syndrome and now is without a mother. And Renee Davis, Native woman, pregnant, and with a couple kids at home, killed by Washington State Police. They are horrible. They're as bad as anybody.
Yep.
Ridiculous.
We can kind of connect this with what the next subject is. They're kind of related. Just the Scout Schultz murder, and then the protest after that at Georgia Tech. Again, like I've said before, and I know a couple of us said this, this is a student with a knife, and it was a really small pocket knife from what I understand. But in this country, people with knives get blown away and shot all these times, and they're saying these campus police didn't have any non-lethal means; they only had guns. But I think in other countries, people with knives get taken down and arrested rather than just shot. So I think it's flawed in our police and their training and their eagerness to murder people on a daily basis using any excuse possible.
Yep. That's what we're working with. That's why I have no love for the American police, FBI, or law enforcement.
I just see a real change in messaging, because remember, even 5 years ago, all we heard about was how local law enforcement was so under-equipped, and they needed tasers. They needed what they call self-defense tools. They needed more shields. They needed more nightsticks because, we need stuff to meet the level of force that we feel is adequate. Well, they all have these things now, but what do? They go directly to lethal force. Even when you analyze their own methodology over a certain period of time, it's pretty obvious to me they're completely full of shit all the time. They just never tell the truth about what their actual motive for quote-unquote enforcement really is. And they don't get questioned. This is another issue that I'm curious to ask. Every local police department, whether it be in the U.S. or top, whether it be in the UK or here in Canada, aren't local forces answerable to their municipal government? Why have municipal governments everywhere abandoned this duty to their citizens?
Well, I can't speak for other governments because I've only lived here. But this government, the police in this country, the crimes that we are talking about, violence against people literally resisting the system and fighting back, even nonviolently. Violence against people of color, especially if it's a black or indigenous person. That's all sanctioned by the government. That gets a round of applause from the government. That's been the way it is this whole time. My pinned tweet on my Twitter is about the myth that the murders of people of color, and especially black people and Native people, started or restarted when Michael Brown was killed. It's like, no. It's been going on since, at least in terms of America, 1776. You have a man named William Brown, was a Louisiana farmer, killed by a shot in the back in 1947 by a wildlife trooper. The trooper then said, "Just shot a nigger, let his folks know." 1999, Antonio Butler was 19 years old when he was shot dead by the Miami Police Department. He was unarmed, Antonio. You have a Native person in the state of Kansas in 1991. I was 3 years old. He was shot 6 times in his own house. His family got a settlement. This is all normal. One more I'll read because it's just the extreme level of violence that is used against us. Prince Jones, 25 years old, was killed when cops fired 15 shots at him on September 1st, 2000. Cops refused to file charges against his killer. And they admitted later, oh wait, that was the wrong guy, because all black people look alike. This has been going on since that hypocritical Declaration of Independence was signed. And that crippling Constitution, and I say crippling to my people, was signed. This is not new stuff. Now they will evolve the genocide. They'll start bringing in tanks and assault weapons with non-lethal non-lethal bullets.
They use
they'll
lethal
put some new
eventually.
stuff out there. They'll change the game a bit, but the overall reality is the same. American police, they're there to harm or kill people of color. And even to protect those civilians who harm or kill people of color. My cousin, who I love very dearly, is in a coma. It's been 12, 13 years. He was run over by a white woman trying to kill her with a car. And because she was black. And the police covered it up. The woman never went to jail. And my cousin is still in that coma. And she was this beautiful, young, vibrant person. And the face that I remember then, I don't recognize now when I look at her. She looks completely different. But long story short, this is the same stuff. Same shit, different day.
Yeah, but eventually they're going to come with live ammo. It's not going to be less than lethal. They've done it before. They'll do it again. But the thing is, people, like you said, some people tend to believe that this phenomena happened with the invention of cell phone cameras, that police brutality came with that. It's just that the more there's cameras everywhere, we're picking up what's always been happening. And before they got away with it because nobody had cameras and there was no evidence, and they took the police word over any citizens. Now, the difference is no matter what evidence you have, no matter how many cameras, they still get off with all that evidence. So it's exactly the same now as it always has been, but now we get to witness it on a daily basis, what people weren't able to witness unless they were actually there in person before. That's the only difference.
And that has, including myself, gotten a lot of people to say, no more. I can't handle any more. That's my limit. I'm fighting back now. I didn't learn about Sandra Bland by normal means. It was the internet. I saw Sam Tabose's murder on the internet. And I think that was the last killing of one of us I actually watched, because to me, there's no need to see that anymore in my own mind. It just hurts too much, and it brings into that intergenerational trauma that Black people face. But yeah, you're right, Tim. There's a lot of things about technology that hurt us, but that's one that's helped because it's made us more aware of the reality that's been here for so long.
25, 30 years ago, there were no cameras on police cars. Everybody didn't have cameras, and a lot of businesses didn't have cameras in the streets. If Sandra Bland's situation would have happened then, nobody would have known about it. Mm-hmm. It would have been some woman who attacked a cop. The cop arrested her for assault or some made-up charge and whatever, like he did. And then she was so depressed she hung herself in jail. You wouldn't have seen anything, how the cop treated her, how he escalated the situation.
They killed
none of that. I'm saying that's what you would have heard, and that's what you would have just said, oh, that happened.
Right.
Because you wouldn't have seen how the cop escalated the situation. You wouldn't have seen how it went down. But now we have to suffer by seeing all these horrible things and knowing what's going on. And yet some people still choose not to believe what they see with their own eyes, and you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of pig supporters out there.
Well, that's the thing that baffles me. Like you said, when there was no way for, or no desire at all by authorities to actually make evidence, be it audio or video or even written documental evidence, that was one thing. But now the population at large has the ability to create evidence, and the police are creating the evidence themselves. Look at the Stokely case. And like you said, Tim, despite all this evidence, they still walk. This just baffles me.
Well, it's like what I said. It's sanctioned. This is what is supposed to happen. When people say, "Oh, well, the cops, they're doing what they're not supposed to be doing." Well, no, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. They are told to harm or kill people of color. They have arrest quotas, just like the prisons have quotas to have shove as many people in there as possible. The prison complex is like, what is it, a $76 billion business every year in the United States. And this is also why the police get so much money. I mean, Obama gave them more money than any president ever. Trump is, as right as he came in the door, he's talking about, hey, man, we love you guys, and it's them, they're attacking you, you're the heroes. This is the narrative. This is the prerogative. They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. The problem is they shouldn't exist. When Native people ran the show, there were no cops, and things were it's a lot more harmony, to say the least.
Yeah, what if like their unions are ridiculous? We shouldn't let this happen. I mean, what if some dude worked at a restaurant and spit in everybody's food, and every time he did that, the union comes and goes, "Nah, you can't fire him. You can't do anything. He's not really guilty. He felt their food needed to be spit in. They were assholes or something." Or
yeah.
some cashier keeps punching out, knocking out their customers. Why'd you hit the customer? Oh, I feared for my life. They were trying to hand me money and I didn't want to take it. I don't know, whatever. then the union steps in and, no, you can't fire him for that. That's totally justified. That's how it is with these police. No matter what, totally justified. Maybe one every few hundred or 1,000, one will actually go to jail for something, and that's insane, or actually lose their job. And it's usually like, you kill black people and nothing happens. You get a grand jury trial, or a judge just says you're justified. But you arrest a white nurse, oh my God, you're fired. You can't be a cop. Blows my mind. Not that it's a right to arrest the nurse because she was in the right, but I'm just saying.
Yeah.
She got arrested. That cop lost his job. I think maybe 2 did. Cops that murdered Philando Castile. Nothing,
Yeah.
not so much as you know what I mean? It's insanity.
Well, we've seen this before in history, in other places, and other times. It's really no different, except the names of the people who die at the hand of the state. And, it was a different time and age and level of technology, etc., but it seems that the stories don't change. The authorities think that shit we pulled 60, 70 years ago, yeah, that'll still work, whatever. Just say that and then say nothing, and we know we'll get away with it. So there's got to be a point.
Vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that was a huge issue that started more than 2 years ago in Canada with a chronically injured man who had problems with workers' compensation in Newfoundland in Canada. He blamed the government, rightly so, for poor treatment of chronically disabled workers, basically giving them enough money to survive, not live. And he put out a couple tweets towards the premier of the province, which resulted in a vigilante action by one member of the premier's security detail to visit his house on Easter Sunday in an unmarked vehicle in civilian clothing, refusing backup, not telling the cops whose jurisdiction it was in, that he was doing it, within 15 minutes of him arriving, the man who made the tweets had 3 bullets in him in his own living room. And of course, the police show up. Oh, well, yeah, we're sure that, he asked for it. And what was the first thing that was done to the officer who had done these things? He was given a vacation in the Caribbean. So he could escape the uproar. Well, you just fucking murdered a citizen, man. Why are you getting a vacation? You should be in holding. You should be remanded like anybody else.
I know, and imagine if that worked the other way around. Imagine if some enraged citizen murders another citizen, and then balloons drop from the ceiling, and they're like, "Yay! You get to go on a Love Boat for 2 weeks." That's about the equivalent of what these cops get every time they murder somebody. It's ridiculous.
It's extreme, and it's an insult, and it doesn't go along with social behavior norms. It doesn't go along with constitutional remedies. It doesn't fit with anything. And I mean, you have to wonder, okay, so how? Well, look at who did it. Badge. State power. Endorsement. There's no other explanation.
The hero killed somebody. The hero killed a criminal suspect. That's how they frame it every time.
Well, you have other police officers in different countries, as I think Glenn was bringing up. UK cops shot their guns just 51 times in a 10-year span from 2003 to 2013. Japan, no one has been shot by the police since 2012. And in Japan, their crime has just completely almost evaporated. It's incredible. They've had international homicides since 2014. They had 395. The U.S. had 12,000. Robberies, they're the lowest on this list according to the Economist. France, the U.S., Britain, Canada, Germany, Russia, Australia, South Korea, and Japan is far and away the leader in the least. And Japan has, they have 250 officers. And wow, that's culture right there. They're not, of course, they're not told like American police are to, hey, you see a colored person, mess with them. You see a woman, she's fair game because you're a cop. But that's the United States. And obviously all countries have their own problems, but in terms of the police, this is an American issue. It's an American genocidal issue.
Yeah, we got some pretty bad police.
I've got a question though, because it very much is an American issue. So, when did this become normal? When did slaughter become normal?
Well,
it's been normal.
That's what I'm
You're
saying.
just learning about it now.
It was normal when the slave patrols were put out.
Exactly.
So we're talking hundreds of years. And like what Tim said, because of the camera phones, because of Twitter, Periscope, Facebook Live, now people see it. But there's still that myth, that's why I have that pinned tweet there, that this just started picking up again. This has always been the reality in the United States.
Just better technology to hunt us down with now. That's all the difference is.
I'll rephrase the question. Now we're just learning about it. How come there is no outrage? There is outrage in pockets, but why is there not national condemnation?
Media.
Now you already know the answer to that question, sir.
People are stupid, brainwashed, and scared. Stupid.
I'm being agent provocateur.
I can remember time after time. This is one reason why I stopped watching MSNBC and CNN, and mainstream U.S. media. When one of us gets killed by the police or just by a civilian, 9 out of 10 times they don't talk about it. I remember when there's a 15-year-old kid, black kid. His name was Jarvis Scruggs. Chicago police killed him. And during that same time frame, like a couple hours after it happened, Chris Matthews was talking to Hillary Clinton for the 58th time during the election cycle. And I'm just sitting back going, are you kidding me? A kid just got killed by the police. Let's pretend like, okay, forget what color he is. A kid just got killed by the police. Why is this not your first, second, and third story on your news channel? But he'd rather talk to a white supremacist. His producers would rather have him talk to a white supremacist. And this is, they suppress it. They suppress it. I mean, I remember when Sarah Lee Circle Bear died. I don't know if I've told this story on the show or not, but she was a Native woman. She was in South Dakota. She was arrested on some petty bond violation, like so many of us are. And she had 2 kids at home. And the cop said, we're moving you to a different cell. And she goes, I'm in pain. I told you I'm having stomach pains, chest pains. When you got me in here, would you give me help or let me just wait a second? Like, no, come on, stop faking, come on. It's like, I'm not faking, she says. I'm like Eric Garner's I Can't Breathe. I'm not faking. So then she collapses, and the officers are like, screw it, and they just walk away, and she dies. And when I heard that, I was like, are you kidding me? This helpless woman just dies because of the police in jail. No one's talking about this. And I contacted reporter after reporter after reporter, New York, Dallas, Chicago, Lansing, Michigan, like all over the place, even the Guardian. Only 2 reporters, journalists, wrote back to me, or got back to me. One was a white woman from the Guardian. She wanted to write the story. Her editors shut her down. The other was a Native man who was a brilliant journalist and writer, Simon Moya Smith, Native man, a freelance journalist. And he wrote the story, ran with it, talked to the family, talked to everybody, did what a journalist is supposed to do. But the point of that story is they don't want to talk about it. They're told not to talk about it. I mean, talk about the election. All that we heard about was Hillary and Trump, and not even the important issues with those 2 people. So they suppress it. And then if they do talk about it, they blame our own double genocide on us. And if you're talking about Latino people, they blame them for coming over the border illegally, not the cops beating them up or harming their women, their children. Muslims, Arabs in this country, they don't talk about the fact that they're targeted like crazy by law enforcement. They just talk about Sharia law and Islam extremism, Muslim extremism. Even the white people by far are much more likely to commit a terrorist act in this country.
73%.
73%. I think if I remember correctly, the number for Muslim people is like 1%.
It's going to depend on how you, but it's about 5%.
Since 9/11.
No, I'm talking since 9/11. Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
5%.
No, I'm talking about those that had deadly outcomes, though. That's where my numbers are.
Okay.
So that's going to include Pulse, and that's going to include San Bernardino, even though Pulse is arguably has nothing to do, with that.
Right. But point being, they will flip it and not talk about how they're harassed and have terrorist actions against them, terrorist acts against them, like that poor Muslim girl was run over and killed. She was, I think I blocked out what happened to her. Did anybody remember that woman? I think it was in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Muslim girl.
A few months ago that they refused to say was a hate crime because we don't have those kind of hate crimes anymore with this DOJ.
Yeah,
and then you had another individual who actually drove like 500 miles to get there just to desecrate the grave.
Right. I'm just trying to remember what exactly. Oh, she was abducted overnight. That was it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. Abducted overnight, killed. Okay.
But
after leaving her place of worship. That if that happened to a white person in a church, oh my goodness. But that's the point. They suppress it. They don't talk about it. And if they do talk about it, they flip the blame on us, which makes people think that, well, if any stuff happens to people of color, it's their own fault.
It is the people's fault, though, for accepting it every time it happens, unless it personally affects them. Because then
apathy.
That's ridiculous. Because
that's our biggest social problem.
When Rodney King got beaten, that was horrifying, and the whole world was like, "Oh my God!" Now people get shot on video, and they're like, "Oh, we see this every single day." You know what I mean? It's so normalized because it has to do with these cameras. We weren't able to see it before, so that time it was shocking. It was like one of the first times the whole world saw this going on. Things that happen every single day, but they saw it for the first time, and now the whole world sees it every day, and they're like, "Oh, I know those crooked ass U.S. cops. It's just what they do. They murder people daily and get away with it." I mean, we know the outcomes of the verdicts as soon as there's going to be a verdict.
That honestly, I wish there was a Twitter mute button or blocker for. Maybe I'll just put the words "acquitted" in my Twitter mute buttons because I know what's going to happen. It hurts to hear about it because I know he got off for killing us. They got off for killing us, and so often the charges aren't even murder; it's manslaughter, like that Betty Shelby snow demon who killed Terrence Crusher. Even though we all know that was murder. They just completely minimize or erase what's going on with us, happening to us, and then they flip it. I mean, in 1985, they bombed black people in Philadelphia. 3 blocks were destroyed. And you look at, I'm going to tweet it out in a second. This stuff is not new, people. This is as American as apple pie.
The other thing that just blows my mind is these things are real and they're happening in the United States and every once in a while in a country like Canada or somewhere else, which is supposedly a liberal Western democracy where the rule of law guarantees that all people are equal, there is evidence out the yin-yang, and it just doesn't seem to matter. But then you have stories created with a complete duplication in many cases, of what has happened to people of color. Like we have the stuff fabricated in Sweden, in Germany, in other places about Somalian rape gangs looking for white women, etc., etc. It almost seems to me like every time there is a crazy white motherfucker that does something to a person of color in the U.S., the actual facts of that incident are extrapolated into a complete fabrication where the people doing the wrong are Muslim, of color, but it's somewhere else.
Yep. That's on purpose.
Yeah, it's just amazing that how real art imitates real life, I guess.
Yep. We just had a in Baton Rouge last weekend where a white guy went around and he randomly, quote unquote, according to the police, killed 2 black men, and they said that they aren't ruling out, quote, that it is a racial crime. And then they found stuff that he had written, written by Hitler, and they said this might have been, we're not ruling it out, but they refused to call it, the hate crime that it was. And then what happens? Every single fucking time, I've been doing this a long time as an educator, showing how the media portrayed that white man versus how they portray black victims in the media. And this is what it does. It minimizes the reality of what is going on by portraying black men who are victims as criminals, no matter what they do. So-and-so was shot by police. He had been involved in drugs in the past. Who cares what happened in the past? Does that mean he deserved to be shot by police? Well, that's what the media is saying. So then it just kind of allows people, especially the majority, white people in the United States, to look at it and go, well, then, he probably deserved it. He was wrong. He did, criminal in the past. Or even if they aren't a criminal past. With Trayvon Martin, we saw them Photoshop a gun into his hand. But with this white gentleman, I won't call him a gentleman, this monster in Baton Rouge, what was the first thing they started saying about him? Oh, he was a lone wolf. He was a loner. His friends can't believe he was such an innocent, good boy. The same thing we saw with fucking Dylan Roof after he killed, after he mass killed 9 individuals at Charleston, 9 black individuals at a Charleston church. The same thing we see every single time. And you want to know why there's not outrage? That's why. The media has socialized us into accepting this type of behavior because one group deserves it and one group don't, according to the media and according to those in power. And we don't even necessarily realize the effect that that has on us. Hi, I'm Gal. Sorry, I get on the media. Y'all know that's why we had to start this show. Me and Nolan get on the media.
Well,
but it's
that's
so important.
The thing. You can't understate the media's influence because the question was asked. Well, why do people think it's so new? It's because of the media. I mean, I never heard about our daily, I should call it daily executions until Michael Brown. I didn't hear about Timothy Thomas, 19-year-old. 9 cops pursued him for parking tickets. Cop shot and killed him. Same cop lied on the police report in 2001. That happened before 9/11. That was I was 13. I didn't hear about that. I'm 29 now. That's when I heard about it. I had to look it up on my own.
So like the Anthony Smith case in St. Louis right now, most of us hadn't even heard of it until after Mike Brown, after this was started to be brought to attention.
John Brokaw never told me that. Dan Rauder never told me that. Peter Jennings never told me that. Katie Kirk never told me that. Timothy Thomas, 19 years old. And those occurrences every single day. Every single day. And if you want to be really exact with it, since 1444. When we were first taken from Africa, kidnapped and enslaved. And if you're talking about indigenous people, 1492. When that awful demonic creature of Satan, Christopher Columbus, came to the Caribbean. It's going on a long time.
Well, obviously, everybody here is well aware. What can we do? I mean, can we just keep
raising
doing
awareness? Yeah.
That's it?
That's it at this point. Until people are held accountable, and the only way they're going to be held accountable is through awareness. So, I mean, if we look at the United States as a whole, if we look at the amount of taxpayer dollars that are used to pay off civil suits after this type of police brutality. So you have a lot of people in America, what do we commonly hear? Oh, people shouldn't be on welfare. They're just lazy, even though that's not true. And I'm not even going to get into that aspect of it. But the fact that it's taking their taxpayer dollars or they're taking their jobs or whatever it is. Yeah, South Park just went through my head now with the taking their jobs. But the
save it for Wednesday, Gal.
I know. And the whole point of it is yes, if you want to, you hear this kind of complaints about tax dollars, and we never hear about the tax dollars that we spend on corporate welfare. And on top of that, every single time there's a police brutality case, our tax dollars pay that off. They just settle for millions and millions of dollars. And I'm not saying that the victim's family doesn't deserve it. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, one way, if we're not going to hold them accountable by law, which we should, and that's a whole nother, we've tried to work on that, but at this point, especially with the DOJ we have now that refuses to even uphold consent decrees, then at least make it to where taxpayer dollars aren't paying that. Make the fucking cops responsible for the money. Make them get insurance that every time that they fucking, do something that is brutal, that they have to pay it out of their pockets. There's one way, but how do we do that? We have to get that kind of a movement going as well.
Yeah, financial responsibility. If you're in a position, public servant as a police officer, and you are sacked from your job and there's a court case brought against you, you should lose your pension. You should lose your job, your pension, and your livelihood. There should be repercussions for your actions. Now, I think America at this present moment, in present day, is as far away from kicking racism as I've ever known it to be. You've taken steps forward, and you've just taken great leaps fucking back. America is so divided at the moment across racial lines. It's fucking terrifying.
Well, divided. Personally, I hate that word because it implies that we
were ever united.
People, well, that too, but as colored people, we just decided to have a problem with white people and the system. We have a problem with white people and the system because they keep killing us. They keep putting us in jail simply because of our skin pigmentation. They keep taking our mothers or our fathers away from us. That's where a division comes from. When I hear the word division, I hear that word go back to Obama. Like, well, Obama created a divide. No, his presence alone, not talking about anything he's done, his presence alone increased tension and increased in a divide, a crux between white America and the rest of the nation.
Is America backward?
Yes, very backward.
We've always been backwards.
And I'll mention. I mentioned a lot at the beginning of each of the People's Weekly when Tim says, what's going on with all of you, and the question brought up, well, what can we do? Well, one thing, and Gal's working on this as well, and so is Tim. We can teach our children the truth in the United States. And one of the biggest problems why Donald Trump's, Hillary Clinton's, Mitch McConnell's, John McCain's keep getting created is because they're indoctrinated with all this gobbledygook of how great America is and how great, and subconsciously how great white people are, and the four founding fathers, the forefathers, all these lies, and then all these gaps in history are in the textbooks. And so, and now you're talking about like Texas and lots of parts of the Midwest and the South. They're not even teaching that slavery happened. They're not teaching that Jim Crow happened. They're not teaching about Native genocide and Native history. So you're going to have a superiority complex as a white person when you get this history. And you're speaking from experience, you're going to have an inferiority complex as a colored person and as a black person. Myself, that happened to me until I thank God for the brother Malcolm X, until I read his autobiography and I watched Denzel play him in the movie. I didn't understand what being proud to be black was. That was a foreign concept to me. I just wanted to keep learning about our history, but it didn't click like, hey, wait, we're beautiful. We're human beings too. You know, let's go from there. But you can change that narrative. And I implore anybody listening to email me at nolanawhack@gmail.com or DM me at nolanhack, HACK. We have folks all over the country. We have groups from all over the country a part of this. And we want this stuff changed. Because we want it changed because we want the truth to be told. And like Gal said, if the truth is told, then we can get somewhere. Because then there's no more hiding. Then there's no more narrative flipping. There's no flipping the blame. There's no reverse racism talk. There's, okay, this country was founded on a double genocide. This country was stolen, every inch of it. And then you brought a whole another race of people here and kidnapped them against their will. And that's how America was built. America owes black people, just in terms of the labor, I'm not talking about the pain and suffering that we're still under, $100 trillion. We performed $100 trillion in free labor. We haven't gotten a cent. Not 1 cent. The slave owners got reparations. And we haven't gotten a cent. And one reason for that is the education system and the media, all this stuff. Hollywood, which is why we have Who's Culture on Wednesday afternoons with me and Gal and I, per correct grammar. Because all this stuff, it's all over the place. White supremacy, anti-color, pro-white, pro-man, anti-woman, pro-straight, anti-gay, pro-cis, anti-trans, pro-able-bodied, anti-disabled, pro-rich or wealthy, anti-poor.
No, I think it's absolutely right, where you guys are saying that you can't underestimate the role of media. I watched something the other night, and, it was something I was aware of, but I needed to hear about it again to remind myself, in the last, basically since this process of globalization has become, since then in especially China, but in most of Eastern Asia, there's been an explosion in cosmetic surgery to make eyes rounder, to look white. In India, there is a massive industry about removing pigment from your skin to look whiter. I mean, this stuff is going on in societies and regions all over the world. But over here in Whitey land, it doesn't exist. You don't hear about it. And I think it's a demonstration of, despite this so-called civilized world we live in, and every document that civilization is supposedly bound to, such as the U.S. Constitution, all men are created equal. Really? Then what is the desire to look like a certain type of man if we're all equal. You know, it's just so deeply ingrained and has been forever. I just don't understand how it can keep going. And people just either refuse to catch on or are so fucking ignorant they don't see it or what. But I mean, it just blows my mind. The 21st century. Well, as far as I'm concerned, from what I know about history, the relation to the tenets that we supposedly hold dear of equality and opportunity, this might be the 21st century on a calendar, but it's the 17th century in reality. Just with lots more toys and weapons.
Involved genocide.
Indeed.
They have us in prison instead of slavery. They had, in California, there was huge fires, actually in Los Angeles recently, and they had women prisoners fighting the fires. Like, that's I guess a lot easier than to hire people or, hire more firefighters. But they are having women prisoners fighting these fires in very dangerous conditions. And Tim did a great show about a couple weeks ago about the prison industrial complex as it impacts women. And you have about 60% of women that are sent to prison. They were previously, before they went to prison, were physically and or sexually abused. So obviously more than half of the women that go into prison were already at a disadvantage because they have to go through all that mental trauma after that horrible event or events. And then they're once, convicted, put in prison. Oh, it's your fault. This is all your fault. It's all your fault. It's all your fault. And go fight some fires for us.
Speaking of sexual abuse, see, I did it. I don't know how to spell segue. I'm trying. There's like 5 different ways now on the chat. So I am going to go with that, though, and discuss Make America Rape Again, is what I've been calling it for 3 weeks. Oh, my goodness. Yeah. The Education Department, finally today, although this was announced 2 weeks ago, decided that the Title IX regulations on sexual abuse that the Obama era ones, especially, they were issued in 2011, they were then updated in 2014, were to be rolled back, that we're no longer going to have them in our universities and colleges. So the guidelines originally had required colleges to investigate complaints of sexual abuse and rape, even if there was a separate criminal probe, like they had to do their own investigation as well. And whereas in a criminal probe there has to be, guilt proven beyond a reasonable doubt, within universities they can judge people based just on the evidence that is available. That's one of the changes we saw in Title IX through the Obama administration. Title IX guidelines is not just about investigating sexual assault, it's also about preventing it. The guidance needs improvement, there's no doubt about that, but not dismantling. The Title IX era, or Obama era Title IX rules also included guidance on ensuring the safety of sexual assault victims, like moving them to a new dorm or changing their schedule so that they didn't have to come in contact with the person who had abused them, or at least they accused of abusing them. But now that's not allowed any longer with this new rollback. She's also, DeVos is who I'm referring to as she, the Secretary of Education, is also getting rid of the rules that prohibit schools, employees, and administrations from discouraging reporting of sexual assault, and the rules that require schools to implement and evaluate sexual assault prevention and education programming. So now teachers and deans can go back to telling people not to report at all. And in the past, we would get in a lot of trouble for that. In 2014, 91% of college campuses didn't report a single incident of rape, and it's not that they didn't necessarily have any, because we don't know. They didn't report it, but we do know that sexual assault on college campuses is higher here than it is in any other country in the world. Most importantly, the rules that DeVos is rescinding addressed the systematic problem of underreporting by universities, meaning that the Obama-era Title IX rules that we used were really focused on that fact that they were underreported. So this is a pretty big deal right now, and it's really getting not a lot of attention, mainly because sexual assault usually gets overlooked because it's uncomfortable to talk about, but it still needs to be discussed, and people need to realize what is going on in our colleges and our universities. One thing I would like to bring up, though, is Betsy DeVos, her husband, is the head of a campaign, or not necessarily, it's a group that offers representation to those accused of sexual assault. And they've donated millions, of course, to this group, but they refuse to donate any money to victims of sexual assault. And the group is openly hostile to any of the Title IX reporting guidelines and has fought to undo them. So that's exactly what she has just done for them. The name of the group is called All Children Matter, and they've been around for over a decade. And in 2008, her husband, who at that time at least was the head of the group, was charged with a $5.2 million fine is actually what he had for illegally funneling campaign money through this group. So there's a lot of connections there with that and the corruption, of course, within it. But we can now discuss it. I just wanted to kind of get that out there because I have a lot to say on this.
As you should.
I'm very angry. There's so much stuff going on, and I completely understand why some things get overlooked. But this is sexual assault on campuses, and I can tell you the kind of harassment that goes on campuses. Now, the reason she said she's doing it is because too many false accusations, but on less than 5% of those that have been reported have been false accusations. So that doesn't even make sense. So 95% isn't worth it to DeVos. It's those 5% of the false accusations that has caused this. But really, we know it's just because of the money that's being funneled into these different groups that are completely against it.
Well, this is a common paradigm to change the actual mission. I mean, this is like the thing with voting. Voter fraud. It doesn't exist.
Right, the voter suppression committee is what I call that committee
exactly.
That they have going.
Exactly. They just come up with this premise of a problem that sounds offensive and should be controlled, but the problem doesn't exist, and the real mission is to create or expand a problem that nobody wants to talk about.
There's that, and we also have to realize that a large portion of the alt-right and Trump's base is men's rights activists who, the MRA as a whole, or red pillars online, are they're often called, who are very, they don't believe that women can be raped. It's because women are property. And so a lot of the outrage that generally came from this is that every single time that there is even a accusation from anybody, male or female, the first thing we see is the internet, jumping on, especially the MRA and the alt-right, saying that they're lying, that it's fake. And then that is what has led to this kind of belief that so many people, specifically women, falsify these type of accusations. And we also have a big problem in the U.S. of not understanding what the hell consent is. And so that then leads to these problems when kids, become adults, they become 18, 19 years old, they go to college, and we start seeing all these kind of problems there with that. That's why it's so important in college and universities because they're learning at the same time, but there are plenty of people who would take advantage of it. I mean, we could talk about the Brock Turner case as a perfect example. Brock Turner was the swimmer from Yale, Stanford, who was caught raping a woman who was drunk and passed out behind a dumpster. She had passed out, and he was just walking by and was like, hey, look, this is my chance. And he got caught by two people who actually stopped him. So there was physical witnesses to this. It wasn't just her word against his word. Because usually when it comes down to her word against his word, most people won't even speak up and report it because they know that they won't be believed. The victim won't. And this has been very common in U.S. history. So we didn't even have things like marital rape laws until the early 90s. So it was completely legal to rape one's wife because they were property. So we have a long way to go when it comes to this type of violence in the U.S. But with the Brock Turner case, we saw even the judges who were, the father who had written a letter saying that his son shouldn't be punished for 2 minutes of fun, and then the judge gave him 6 months in jail or prison, and he got 3 months is all he spent, and he's out and about doing whatever the hell he wants to do because the judge didn't want to ruin his future, his swimming future, because he was such a wonderful white guy who didn't deserve that, even though he violently raped somebody. But hey, let's not talk about that.
He didn't want to jeopardize his bright future.
Is that what it was? Thank you.
That's what the judge said, something to that effect.
Now, isn't this one of the things that the so-called Muslim extremists are accused of doing all the time?
This is our Christian Sharia law. I mean, it's really no different when you get to it. It's no different than Sharia law. You hear this all the time. We don't want Sharia law in the U.S., blah, blah, blah. No, but your Christian right-wing fundamental law is the exact same fucking thing.
Well, I know I created a real shitstorm with a couple people about 6 months ago there are a lot of Canadian rednecks as well who are just thick as a fucking brick. And it was, Sharia law is coming. We can't have this. And I said, oh, really? So none of that exists now? No, not at all. And I said, so your real issue is you don't like the hats that are different from what would happen if Sharia law came in compared to what we actually have now. You have a problem with which hat will be allowed to dictate. And that just caused a complete shitstorm. Because really, as far as I'm concerned, with the reality we have in these Western Christian democracies, compared to what is sold as the fear of Sharia law, what's the difference? Skin color and the hat behind the podium. That's it.
I always hear it's because their religion isn't real. They don't have the true God.
Oh yeah,
That's
my
what
God
I
can beat up
usually
your
hear.
God.
Yeah, it's like, everybody, oh, our God's real, your God's pretend.
Well, I think that's a general reflection on the entire state. Reality is a state of mind, apparently.
Yeah.
Perception.
Or lack thereof.
It's like recently I think it was a senator or a congresswoman, I don't have it in front of me here, but she retweeted this meme that showed a car running over a bunch of people, and it said all lives splatter, and said we should all kind of embrace this theory or something. And I said, I did a tweet where I said, if ISIS does it for Islamic extremists do this, then it's ungodly terror. But if white nationalists, Christians, or white supremacists do it, it's great and patriotic. You know what I mean? That's how it works. All the way down from Sharia law to these terrorist attacks. If it's on your side, it's good, it's for God, it's for country, it's in the best interest. And if it's on the other side, it's evil and satanic and horrible. And they're both doing the same thing, and both sides see it that way. There's the whole problem right there.
Everybody's the victim of their own story, even when it's no rational aspect of it. And so they always think that they're right and everybody else is wrong. And it comes down to, the conflict we have with norms and subcultures, but ultimately we see, where the majority group of any society is then legitimated, whereas everybody else is not. And so when we see this kind of hatred that's legitimated, it's because that's what's expected of the white population in the U.S. For fuck's sake, there was a student at my school today wearing a KKK shirt. I didn't even know they made shirts.
That was wasted on you, Gail.
I do apologize, but yes, I can't, just violently attack a student. I would get fired.
That's why you're supposed to keep a sledgehammer in your trunk at all times.
No, I don't do the violence. I save that for you.
There's a site online that I know it's Klan run or neo-Nazi run or something. It's all about Martin Luther King. And they're trying to whitewash. Not whitewash, excuse me. Shouldn't say the opposite. They're trying to sensationalize the fact that he liked sex a little too much and did cheat on Coretta Scott more than a time or two.
Are these Trump supporters?
There's some they're all white or they're Trump supporters or they're neo-Nazis or something. I'm trying to look for the site.
They're all
now.
together.
Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, how can you support Trump or any of these people, Clinton, whatever, and then be against and shame somebody for cheating on their wife or wanting sex too much? How can you say JFK was good or Trump is good? They're all the same like that. So that's invalid. That's a personal.
It is invalid.
Damn thing. He wasn't president either.
Well, that too. But they're only saying that to just try to discredit him and get people to hate him. But the funny thing, you brought up the Kennedys, Jacqueline Kennedy herself, after J. Edgar Hoover was basically going around the White House and the Capitol, say, hey, look, guys, Martin is philandering all over the place, and you're having sex all over the place away from Coretta. See how disgusting he is? So Jackie Kennedy sees this and says, oh, what a horrible, horrible, disgusting man. Who the fuck are you married to, lady?
Right. John F. Kennedy was a philanderer. Lots and lots of sexual partners.
I mean, I just look at it like, that's the bad part of the whole thing was religion being added, in my opinion. Because these religious, this is so bad, this is so bad, this is so bad, this is horrible, this you go to hell or whatever. And all these religious people do that. If it wasn't for religion, it would just be cheating on his wife, and it would be a personal issue that the family needed to deal with. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it is with these preachers now. They're all doing all this stuff they're against, supposedly.
Oh, always. What I find interesting, though, and which is really what you just touched on, is that that's not even a regular norm anymore in our society. So the idea that Trump had cheated on all of his wives wasn't anything to these evangelicals who claim to be Christians and claim to, be completely against adultery, but they had no problem supporting this adulterer. And that's only one of the many things that we could talk about along those lines. But, even if you go back to Clinton and being impeached for a blowjob, but there are plenty of reasons to have impeached Clinton, but his sexual, ideology should have had nothing to do with that. If you take religion out of it, right? And it just shows, like, even in 20 years, the difference between what the evangelicals are willing to accept when it comes to party over country in that sense. There's plenty of senses we can go into.
There's, especially with Clinton, like you said, the easy one is the crime bill. If someone signs something like that, they should be put in prison. They should be impeached immediately. 100,000 police officers. Also, the massive amounts of troops over in Kosovo, adding to the bloodshed there. Yeah, there's plenty of things you can get him for, but we focus on the philandering. But it's the theme of the show, it seems like, is the suppression of the truth and the media hiding everything that's important. The last time I saw Rachel Maddow's show, I was in somebody else's house, so I wasn't the one to turn on. All the show was talking about Hillary and Trump, and this is after the election, before he got inaugurated. And she was talking about how, there's this National Enquirer report, and the headlines on it say racist and money launderer and distrustful. I can't remember the third one was. And I'm like, first of all, yes, and yes. You're just taking the worst source possible to try to spin your own narrative for your party and, the woman that you love so much. And at the same time, there were 3 Native people in the Dakotas freezing. 2 had already frozen to death. 1 was missing. Rachel Maddow doesn't care about that at all. She'd rather just pump up her party instead of talking about a very serious matter that happens every single year when it gets really cold, because Native people on the reservations lack heat, they lack power, so it gets ridiculously cold. But Rachel Maddow didn't care, and that's supposed to be the most liberal network on television.
I think what applies there is something that Noam Chomsky is famous for saying publicly, that in America especially, there is this belief that it's a democratic society and things are debated and things are discussed and viewpoints are acknowledged. But the reality is there is vociferous debate in the United States, but the spectrum where it is allowed is so narrow that it makes absolutely no difference at the end of the day. Let's talk about abortion forever. Let's talk about, things that are simply a matter of choice, that no government should be interfering in. Those are the things that are never allowed to go away. But areas where the government actually could make progress and fulfill their mandate, you're not allowed to talk about.
Absolutely right.
It's a mirage.
Yeah, it's a mirage. Most people live in the Matrix. And even if they're shown a way to get out and shown a light outside of it, hey, look, check out what's really happening. Most of those people don't want to come out of the Matrix.
Most of the people are going to take the blue pill.
Exactly. That's just, especially since you've been bombarded with this indoctrination since birth. And we talked about on an earlier show how kids, like children, young children, even toddlers, are being taught racism because of what they watch or what their parents tell them. Robots are being taught racism. I mean, yeah, it's hard to get out of that matrix, but I'm not going to, play a violin of sympathy for them. I mean, my people are dying every single day. So I have no sympathy for that. But at least from a intellectual standpoint, I understand it.
So I'm curious, with the changes coming from the federal level to put some sort of accountability on post-secondary institutions for sexual crime, with that being abandoned, how long are these changes going to take before there's a real difference on campuses all over the U.S.? Is this going to encourage a sudden spike in sexual crime, or is this just more a matter of we don't want to talk about it, never mind?
I don't think necessarily that we'll see a sudden spike. I mean, as I said, in 2014, 91% of campuses didn't even report, even though they had a mandate to. And there was really no, I think the only thing that was used as a sense of punishment if they didn't report was lack, funding being cut. So they would just have that put in place by donations. What we will see, though, is this kind of reverse for deans and teachers and professors and anybody working within staff. I expect to see, not all schools, believe me, many universities had these kind of guidelines at least in place, whether or not they agreed with them or whether or not they upheld them. But there's been a massive increase in education to staff and anybody who works within the university, especially because of the Domestic Violence Awareness Prevention Act that was passed, I do believe, 3 years ago, that every university employee had to go through training. I know this because I went through it. There has been this kind of increase in that kind of awareness. So I don't think that we're necessarily going to see a spike as much because it was still already such a big problem. We see every January one of the big Ivy League colleges reports kind of the survey that they do where it's almost like between 80 and 90% of men admit that they would rape if the situation was right. They don't necessarily say those words in the survey. What they do is ask them, would you do this? Would you do that? A lot of time it has to do with consent, if this person was drunk or if you were drunk. But the amount of people that would be like, yes, I would do that is just staggering. So we have a rape culture that we have to work on, and it's not just going to be from Title IX guidelines or lack thereof. We have to start awareness at a much earlier age. That is where we need to focus. But now that these federal guidelines are gone, we're even going to lose a little bit of awareness that we did have for those that are now coming into the universities.
What was that number again for men who said they would rape?
I'm going to get you the actual number from each study, but it usually ranges between 75 and 90%.
Goodness gracious.
Stanford was the most recent one, I do believe. Harvard was last year. Yale was the year before. This is pretty common. I've been reporting that same number between 75 and 90% for the last 10 years, and every time the new one comes out. But I can get you those numbers. It'll just take me a little bit to research and get it because it's every January.
Wow. I shouldn't be surprised. This is like racism. I've said stats like that about racism and gotten the same wow reaction.
Exactly. And a lot of people think that all rape has the only kind of quote unquote rape or sexual assault that should be reported is the violent type where it's a stranger situation. 85 to 90% of all sexual assaults in the United States are done by somebody that the individual knows. And so they don't tend to report on that because they say, well, I wasn't assaulted or I wasn't raped. I wasn't somebody who was hiding in the bushes. It goes back to that whole kind of myth of stranger danger that we fight all the time, that you're more likely to be murdered by somebody you know. It's the same myth that we have with black on black and white on white crime, or black on black crime actually, with the myth of it. The idea that any crime is more or less likely to occur, when in reality almost all crime is intra-racial. So when I hear somebody talk about black on black crime, I then give them the stats for white on white crime, so I can show the proof that this is an intra-racial problem. People murder who they know. Crime is committed against who they know and who they come in contact with. It's not always. Now that doesn't mean you still have that 10% of stranger kind of, well, stranger danger, but it's not. We aren't afraid of the people that we're around. We aren't afraid of the people that we know. So whether it is, significant others, relationships, or brothers or uncles or sisters, or because it happens to men as well. That's what a lot of people don't realize, whether gay men or straight men are also sexually assaulted regularly. It's not talked about enough. It needs to be talked about a whole hell of a lot more, but that's part of that rape culture, that we can't discuss it, and it's uncomfortable. And believe me, I know how uncomfortable it is. I teach an entire class on it, and it is very uncomfortable to sit there and talk in front of hundreds of people, but it doesn't matter. It has to be talked about. about. A lot of the shit we talk about is uncomfortable. Doesn't mean we don't discuss it.
We have to discuss it. It should be talked about. I mean,
problems aren't going to go away by ignoring them. That's how we got to this fucking point in the first place in 2017.
Exactly. I always say it's all connected. You talk about transphobia, the rape culture, racism. This is Western society. This is capitalism, and even white culture. Because if you look at Native societies and Black societies in Africa before white people, ruined both places, African people had women as literal gods, all-powerful being gods, and many societies and governments in Turtle Island, Native people had women in charge. It was a
women had high social status in a lot of different tribes. Not
a patriarchy. It was the opposite. It was a matriarchy. And that's another thing people definitely don't want to talk about. Oh, wait. This is a white people problem? What? Wait a minute. Like, no. But we don't talk about it. It's going to keep happening. Like Morgan Freeman, I am so done with that man, as great as he is as an actor. I remember he said a few years ago, half the quote I loved, the other half I hated. He first said, I hate Black History Month. There should be no Black History Month. I mean, when is your history? He was talking to Mike Wallace at the time. I mean, is there a Jewish History Month? There's a White History Month? Yeah. And then he said, Mike Wallace was like, well, how do you fix racism? And then Morgan goes, stop talking about it. No, Morgan, no. And then he came out recently and I guess he was talking about the Trump-Russia thing, and he said, the pillars of this great democracy were built 241 years ago, and we need to stick with those to fix this country. What the hell? Wait a minute. You were in glory, dude.
Right. Oh, it breaks my heart as well because he is a fantastic actor, but it's like every time I see him, I just cringe now.
Exactly.
Shawshank Redemption.
We have to talk about this stuff, or it's going to keep happening. We'll talk about the Holocaust, as we should, but we don't talk about any other genocides.
You guys I just realized we've never done this show on a day that wasn't White History Recognition Day. Pretty crazy.
Yeah, but every day, every day is White History Recognition Day. Yet white people still say they should have a White History Month.
I love that, yeah.
And then my favorite one was, what do you mean you're remaking you're making another Wiz about the Wizard of Oz? What if we made an all white version of the Wizard of Oz?
Like, that's the Wizard of Oz, yo.
That's what I was saying. The Wizard of Oz was the white version of the Wiz.
Right, exactly. That's one of the things that always gets me is it's always, you always get these kind of white tears whenever there is a person of color, or Hamilton, for example, when it first came out. And you still hear people complain about it, but it did get, immensely popular, so it has a little bit less now. But casting people of color in anything that is a remake or based on a character, and then as soon as you get the, Star Wars with the black Jedi, what's the first thing that happened? They just attacked. Oh, you've ruined the movie. Anything. And it's just amazing to me, the hypocrisy that comes out of it. The idea that we are snowflakes, but they aren't, and they're the ones that bitch the most. That's privilege.
About movies. That stuff doesn't even matter in the real world.
It does matter because for colored people and oppressed people, because representation matters. That's why the whole white Jesus thing is so problematic. And
but harmful. I'm saying if they put a black dude in a Star Wars movie and they flip out, it doesn't matter. It's a fucking movie. Put whoever they want in it. That's what I'm saying. Like it's a movie.
Actor. Yeah.
My problem is, especially when they have an Asian character played by a white man. Now I'm gonna bitch. But That's if there's no other. It's the whole point of the lack of representation, which now we've gone back into the Wednesday show.
What's that dude, Tim Conway? That was the dude in the Breakfast at Tiffany's, right?
Tim Conway? I know Mickey Rooney was the star.
Maybe it was Mickey Rooney. I don't know. I get them all confused. Yeah,
he played a racist character. He was pretending he was playing an Asian person. And,
that's what I meant. I'm sorry. I thought it was. I get them confused. These actors sometimes.
Well, that's why we have the show for you on Wednesdays, Tim. Who's Culture on Wednesday afternoons, showing the white supremacy brains into pop culture. Yeah.
Yep. The whole point was to educate Tim.
Exactly. It's not for everybody else. No, I'm kidding.
Then maybe I should actually listen to it, right? No, I'm just kidding.
No. He produces it, but he doesn't listen to it, folks.
Right. He just mutes us for the whole time.
He'll get calls in and then go back and take a walk or something. Yeah. But I think that's the theme of today's People's Weekly is we have to talk about this stuff. This stuff has to come to light. The truth has to be told, and especially at a young age, because that's when the mind is being shaped.
I know that we're getting close to the end. I just want to give a shout out to anybody listening to call your senators, because they're going to try to, repeal Obamacare on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Or, I'm sorry, the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
And John McCain has come out publicly saying he will not vote for it.
Right, so it looks like it's not going to pass, but I do want to state that until I see that vote, granted, I already did before, but still, until I won't believe it, because what they've done is, for Murkowski's vote in Alaska, what they went in and they wrote in that her state won't be affected, that with they won't take the Medicaid expansion away from her and 4 other states because they're trying to buy those votes. So I won't be shocked if they do that for Arizona.
That should demonstrate right there to the American people that their own governmental process is nothing but an inside game, plain and simple.
And today a poll came out: 60% of Americans don't want the ACA to be repealed. So it doesn't even matter what we want. I think it was Grassley yesterday who came out and stated that, this is bad for the people, but we were only elected to come in and repeal Obamacare. So he even stated it in his own statement that it's bad for the people, but he's going to vote for it.
For the record, I want it repealed, and I want Medicare for everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, absolutely. Single payer, 100% of the way.
We shouldn't even be in this situation in the first place. Oh, a friend of mine just she's at the pharmacy listening still, and thank you for that. And she gave me a picture of Andrew Jackson, An American Populist by John Meacham, Time Special Edition, and his big, ugly, oval face is on the cover of the Time Special Edition in the pharmacy. This is exactly what we're talking about. A man who killed at least double, the people that Hitler killed in the Holocaust is a hero in American society. He has statues, schools, cities named after him. Andrew Jackson.
He's also on money.
And he's on money, the most famous bill in America. And I would like to say this because it keeps getting lost. If Trump had not come in and said, no, Tubman is not going to be on the bill. Even if he didn't say that, Tubman would have had to share the bill with Jackson in the first place. So it still would have been horrible. There's no reason a former slave who escaped slavery, one of the biggest heroes in the history of the world, should share a bill with a genocidal murderer. One of the worst people that ever lived. One of the best people that ever lived. One of the worst people. So either way, it was always bad. Just remember that. Before Trump came out with that, it was still bad.
Well, we know. Well, let's not go into any rants about how every president sucks or anything, but
That's what Twitter
Trump
does
in the White House removed the Lincoln picture that Obama put up and put up a Jackson picture in the White House.
Nah, they're both horrible, but I didn't know that he replaced the Lincoln one.
That's what I had read in the article. I hope it was accurate. But then it had a picture of him. So either way, they have a big picture of Jackson in the damn White House.
Here's a metaphor for you. Having Andrew Jackson and Harriet Tubman on the same note of currency would be the same as having Mao Zedong and the Dalai Lama on the 20 yuan bill.
Or Hitler and Anne Frank.
Indeed. Good one. And see how we've repaired things? See how far we've come, people? Holy shit.
Yeah, we haven't come. It's just. Yeah. We haven't really come that far at all. We're just not literal slaves anymore.
Well, yeah, that's like I said earlier. The only thing that's changed is technology and the ability to kill more efficiently and silently. That's all that's changed. Attitudes really haven't.
Yeah. Where's Top? Is he still in here?
I think he's watching Netflix and ignoring us.
Oh.
No, I'm not. I'm still here. I'm just on mute listening.
What's going on in the UK, Top?
I wouldn't ask.
Okay, we're in America over here, except for Glenn. We want to hear your drama.
We're Turtle Island. Yeah, what's going on across the pond?
That's true. We want to hear your drama.
Yeah, well, it's Brexit, and it's a shambles. Prime Minister May took an entire entourage of UK media over to Florence today, only to give a presentation to UK media and then come back again. She could have done it fucking here. Cost a fortune.
Well, Brexit fits right in with what we're talking about anyway, with the white mainstream society and the way Brexit came about.
Yeah, we've got the Nazi narrative, the anti-European narrative, etc. It's all a mess. Nobody really knows what they're doing. We're just like you guys, just not as bad.
Pretty much. Well, yeah. You guys started this.
Take full responsibility.
White supremacy started in Europe, ladies and gentlemen.
Blame Top.
I won't
kidding.
do that.
Don't blame Top. I'm just kidding.
I won't do that. Top's one of the good ones.
Hey, you guys, we're hitting the mark. Anything anybody want to say before we wrap it all up?
Well, I'll say. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll just get it in quick. I just want to remind everybody, remember, the 5th of November. We will be back again this year. We will be fortified. We will be protected, and we will have content that you're not going to want to miss. That's all.
I'll say two quick things. One, completely random but very important, speaking of statues and all that. Vasily Aripov. I will always botch his last name, and I apologize to you, Vasily, for that. It's the man who saved nuclear war. Estimated he saved about 600 million lives. In October of 1962, he stopped two other Russian officers on a Russian submarine right next to Cuba, and they were about to fire a nuclear weapon at the United States, and he stopped it. Had that weapon been fired, all hell would have broken loose. So I want to say thank you, Vasily. There should be statues of you all over the world.
Just to highlight, because that's a very important point. Do you know what this guy did? His computer flashed at him and told him he was under attack and that he needed to fire a nuclear missile. He didn't listen to the screens or the voices, people. He saved the world by not doing as he was told. How's that?
It required a unanimous vote from the submarine. There were depth charges being dropped from a American destroyer, and they were supposed to be practice rounds. They just did not know that the Russians were there, and the Russians didn't know that they were practice depth charges. So yeah, Vasily did not listen, and it had to be a unanimous vote. He kept putting his foot down, and he saved an estimated 600 million lives. And also, like to say again, email me, tweet, or DM me on Twitter if you want to join this massive national action. And once it hits, we're going to keep it going until we really fix. We're going to do as much fixing of this education system as we can to actually teach the kids the truth, teach the truth to our children. So many groups on board with us. Black Lives Matter Arizona, Vermont, section of the American Indian Movement is with us. And you can be anywhere in the country and even do this, help us out and help the people out, help yourself out from your own home. Nolan AW Hack, NOLAN AEW HACK at Gmail, and then Nolan Hack on Twitter. And Tim, thanks as always for having me on.
The only thing I would add, well, from my end, if you are interested in the St. Louis protest, you can follow me on Twitter at STLGal_36. I'll tweet out every live stream I come across. There will be protests tonight. I think there will be some picking up here in just a couple minutes, actually. Not sure yet. But keep your eyes on St. Louis. They're not done yet. Oh, yeah, and tune into Top Gear Live on Sunday because I'm a horrible promoter. Top, promote the show.
Yeah, once we've got something to promote, guys, we'll let you know.
I know, that's what I always say. We don't have anything to promote other than tune in.
There'll be something going on it without fail. Don't worry.
And Whose Culture is on Wednesday afternoons, talking about the pop culture in the United States and all the tricks and magic tricks that Hollywood does to our minds. Me and Gal and I.
Just to go, please tune in to Whose Culture. It's a fantastic kickoff show. Congratulations, guys. It was really fascinating to listen to. And you had an awesome guest. You got a lot to live up to this week.
I was just going to say, we're never going to be able to live up to that, man. That's what I told Nolan. Like, we are screwed.
But thank you, Top, for those kind words. We very much appreciate it.
Pleasure, man. Pleasure. We're going to have a bit of fun on Sunday. We're going to have a competition. Who's the biggest badass? And Kim Jong-un and Herr Trump is the two contenders for the badasses of the week. Who can be the most derogatory? We're going to have a competition.
I'm not there.
You can tune in.
And everybody, make sure you do tune in to Top Gear Live. Very informative show.
Yeah, so you can talk about the dick measuring contest that's going on over nukes, because that's all it fucking is right now. And I hope it stays that way. By the way.
Yeah, microscopic instrumentation has come on leaps and bounds.
That's all I hear every time I hear. Trump said this, Kim Jong-un said this. All I hear is, my dick is bigger. No, my dick is bigger. No, my dick is bigger. That's all I hear. I don't hear anything else from it.
That's basically what it is.
So we can settle all this with a ruler, couldn't we?
Oh, boy.
We could, but these are not rational, logical people. These are like 3-year-old toddlers.
I think it should just be a major media event. Let Fox News cover it, and we just have a ruler, and they'll have the little censored screen, and they'll each whip them out, and whoever wins. The other one has to shut up.
Fake news.
This is the problem. Nobody's got anything large enough to measure their egos, so we're just going to resort to their dicks.
And they are inversely proportional.
Indeed.
What a way to end the show.
Right.
Well,
I
there's
gotta
one-
go watch the Snowden
Well, Glenn,
John
go ahead.
Oliver interview right now.
Oh, I
before
may
we
check
go,
that out
Glenn,
myself. No, nothing.
The View Up Here is coming back next month.
Yeah, the View Up Here will be back sometime in early October. I can't really say for sure yet. I've really enjoyed my time getting a break from the constant one-man production. But then on the other side of the coin, there's so much stuff that's happened and is about to happen that it's almost like the forest for the trees now. Which show do I try and make first? So there's always a price to pay. But I'd also like to put in an external plug. Right now, PBS is halfway through the Ken Burns, Lynn Rebick documentary series, The Vietnam War. I'm a big fan of Ken Burns and the projects he chooses to do and the way he presents them. The Vietnam War is just as good as anything he's ever done before. I hope every American watches it. They need to understand. And there are so many parallels between what happened 40 years ago and what's happening right now.
Including Bobby Kennedy bullying LBJ into continuing Vietnam.
Absolutely. That's all I got.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. I guess we'll see you next week, and don't forget to listen to Top Gear Live on a non-UK radio on Sundays, and Wednesday mornings the Who's Culture with Gail and Nolan, and eventually in the early couple of weeks of October, The View Up Here on Wednesday nights with Canadian Glenn. And we'll see you guys next week.
Peace, y'all. Have a